Hey everyone, in this video we're going to keep going with part 8 of the Perseus story from Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles. So this part is called The Rescue, and if you remember the story, excuse me, up until this point, we've had Perseus, he already completed the first part of his quest, which was, killing Medusa. He already did that, and on his way back, you might recall, he stopped off and ran into this situation where you have the king who is sacrificing his daughter Andromeda to the sea monster of Poseidon or Neptune, depending which version you want to look at, in order to kind of appease the mistakes he's made. And Perseus shows up and he realizes what's happening, and now he's going to rescue Andromeda. So that's where we're going to pick up the story. So it starts with Ad Perseus, ubi haec vidit, gladium suum eduxit, et postquam talaria induit in aera sublatus est. So you have Perseus, right? When he saw haec, which means these, it's the neuter substantive plural. So you're going to say these things, meaning this situation, you might say, everything happening. When he saw it, he eduxit, he drew or took out his gladius, his sword, right? Suum gladium. So he drew his sword, and after induit, right? Postquam is just afterward. Induit, he put on his talaria. Now remember, the talaria are the winged sandals he has, and when he puts them on, in aera sublatus est, he gets lifted up into the sky. He can fly, right? So literally, after he put on his talaria, he was lifted in aera, into the sky or into the air, you might say. And remember, sublatus est is the perfect tense passive voice. It comes from tolo tolere, which means to lift. Sublatus is that fourth principal part. You put the verb esse on it, after it rather, the present tense, and you have perfect passive. So he was lifted into the sky. And again, it just means he's flying. Then you have tum, de super, in monstrum impetum subito fecit, et gladios suo colum eos graviter vulnerave. So you have then, right? De super means above, right? So he's above the monster, he's flying, right? He suddenly made, subito fecit, right? He made an impetum, an attack in monstrum, at the monster, right? Into the monster. So he's hacking at him with his sword is kind of the idea. And again, impetum could be an attack, a strike, however you want to interpret that. But he did it, and vulnerave. So not only did he fake it, the impetum, right? He made the attack, but vulnerave, he wounded, right? He wounded the monster, graviter, gravely, right? Seriously wounded it, gladios suo, with his sword, okay? And what did he wound? The colum, the neck, eos, of it, meaning of the monster. So it's saying that he came in and swiped at the monster's neck, and he seriously wounded it with his sword, right? So, because again, he's flying above, de super, he's flying above the sea monster, and he wounds it in the neck. Then you have monstrum ubi sensit vulnus, fremitum horribilem edidit, et sine mora totum corpus in aquam mersit. So the monster, right? Remember, it's neuter. It's talking about the sea monster. When it sensed the vulnus, the wound, right? Aided it. Now this is coming from a or x, meaning out of, right? So it's a compound verb. You have x plus dated. So in other words, the reason you have this is in the middle from, like dodare, deity, right here. In the middle of those compound verbs, oftentimes that E becomes an I, which is why it's spelled E-D-I-D-I-T. But either way, it means to like let out, basically, or pour forth, or give out. So it gave out this fremitum horribilum, this horrible shout, or noise, you might say, or roar might be the best way to translate it. It gave out this horrible roar, right? Because it just got wounded in the neck. At sine mora, without delay, mersit, it submerged, right? Same idea. It submerged into the water, totum corpus, its entire body, right? So it kind of dropped, you might say, or submerged its whole body into the water, right? It goes back where it had been in response to getting stabbed by Perseus, right? It submerges itself to high. Then you have Perseus, dum circum litus volat, reditum eus expectabat. So Perseus, while he's flying around, while he was flying, right, volat, you could, and I know it's present tense, but you could translate it imperfectly to kind of match up with expectabat, but saying while he was flying around the shore, the litus, right, he was looking for expectabat, he was watching out for the return of it, reditum eus, meaning the return, reditum, of the sea monster. So he strikes it once, but he's not feeling happy about just getting it once. He's waiting to see if it comes back, which is a pretty smart move by him, right? So he's waiting, hovering for the sea monster to come back. Then you have mare autem interea undique sanguine inficitur. So the mare, the sea, right, however, on all sides, and again, interea means meanwhile, so you could say, like meanwhile, the sea on all sides, undique, all over the place, inficitur, it was covered sanguine, with blood. right? So he stabbed the sea monster. So of course it would kind of make sense that you have this blood everywhere. And again, inficitur comes from inficio and ficere. It can mean to stain or to kind of color maybe, or dye, however you want to interpret it. Stained probably works the best here. It was stained with blood, right? So he knows that he wounded it because there's blood all over the place, right? And he's waiting for it to come back. Then you have Postpartum Tempest, bellua rorsus caput sustulit. So again, after a short time, a breve tempest, right? So after a short time, the bellua, the monster, the beast, however you want to interpret that, rorsus, again, it's sustulit, it lifted up, perfect tense, its caput, right? Its head. So it kind of poked its head out of the water, which is what Perseus was waiting for, right? He was waiting to see if it comes back, and it does. It pokes its head out of the water. Then you have moxtamen a Perseo ictu graviore vulnerata est. So soon, however, right, vulnerata est. And again, the vulnerata is going with bellua from the previous part of the sentence, the monster, right? It was wounded. It's perfect tense, passive voice. So it was wounded, graviore, seriously wounded. Or more seriously, you might say. It's a comparative use of the ablative here. So it was you might even say even more seriously wounded by Perseus, right? Or it was wounded with an even more serious ictu strike, maybe is a good way to do it. So again, the ictu graviore here is ablative. And again, what it's really doing is that comparative adjective of gravis, which means serious, right? So it's even more serious ictu strike by Perseus, right? That's what wounded it. So again, Perseus here is the ablative of agent. Who's wounding the monster is the idea. So again, it gets even worse strike the second time, okay? Then you have tum iterum se in undas mersit neque postea visa est. So then, once again, right, iterum, again, mersit, it submerged itself, se mersit, right? So se is the reflexive pronoun, it submerged itself in undas, not into the water, but into the waves. Same idea, just another way of saying it, into the waves. When you see undas, wave, it's always, whenever you're dealing with the ocean, you see this in Latin. Think undulate, right, as kind of a good derivative of it, talking about a wave. So it goes down into the waves, and never again, neque postea, it was never again seen, visa est. And if you're wondering why it's visa, again, it's talking about the bellua, the monster. So the monster never again was seen, perfect tense, passive voice. Okay, so it's a pretty short section. That's the whole idea of the rescue, right? He rescues Andromeda. Perseus doesn't necessarily kill the sea monster, but at least gravely wounds it so it never comes back, which is what his whole point was, right? And luckily he still has all his heroic armor and weapons and his sweet talaria, right, to get him where he needs to be. But, again, this part of the story is not particularly difficult in terms of the Latin. Just keep practicing it and reading it. The best part, I think, of Ritchie's Fabulae is reading these aloud and trying to visualize what's going on. It's just to really help you practice the Latin you already know. So hopefully you're feeling pretty good about it. If there was anything that popped up that you want to know more about, or maybe you think I translated something wrong, feel free to let me know. Happy to do it. Just put it in the comments and I'll be happy to help. But again, I would highly recommend you read this story aloud. Try to let it wash over you without directly translating it necessarily, and then get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening. But you'd be surprised how much you understand just by listening and reading the story in Latin and trying to visualize the events in your head. That's the way to go. Okay? If you have any questions, again, let me know. But otherwise, good luck.